So now let's jump into the actual topic for today, which is your um, statements, indentation, and conditionals. So these things which we have been using apart from some specific statements, but we have been using these things, but we are not actually aware that they are what we call them. Okay. So let's first talk about what are statements and expressions and learn about their differences. So a statement is an instruction that the Python interpreter can execute, right? So every language has a interpreter, right? So you write something there, and then it interprets in basically in a different manner, and then it communicates with the hardware, and then it performs some operation in your CPU, and it returns the corresponding output, right? So statement is essentially an instruction which the Python interpreter can execute, right? So up till now we have been seeing the assignment statement, right? So statements such as if you talk about statements such as x is equal to 1, right? So this is an assignment statement, right? Because you're assigning the value 1 to the variable x. Okay. So okay, I'll just delete this. Okay. So as you're already aware, we have seen the assignment statement so far, but we have a bunch of other kinds of statements that we'll see some today, and some we'll see over the course of next few weeks too, right? So there are statements such as while statements, for statements, if statements, and import statements, right? There are other bunch of other statements too, but of course we'll be covering them as and when they are required. Okay. So this is what a statement is, something what you can provide to an interpreter. So what happens when I write x is equal to 1 and I just run this particular cell? Okay, maybe because I have the freedom to in fact write this, so I'll not use the annotation, but I can write it here. Okay, so x is equal to 1. So when I run this, so what happens, right? So I'm giving an instruction to Python that assign a value 1 to a variable x. Okay, but now you might ask, what is x? Where is x, right? So x is at a certain memory location in your computer, or in fact when we are running Colab notebook. So there is, let's say Google has lots of huge data centers, right? So you can imagine, let's say this is a data center, and it has, so it's a really big data center. So they can be like mini towns or something like that, and every data center has huge servers there, and every server will have some set of very small computers. Okay, so most probably this particular code is running on that small computer hosted in a Google server, right? So that computer has some memory, right? So this, when I'm executing x is equal to 1, what's happening underneath, that 1 is being assigned to a variable x, and Python knows that this variable resides in a particular memory location. So let's say if I don't know if this is a good way to visualize the memory location. So let's say this is one memory address, this is another memory address. So maybe x has been stored here, right? If I write something like y is equal to 2, so y might take this particular memory address, right? So those constructs we don't have to bother about, because this is how the progress of the entire computer has been, right? So when people started developing computers since the 1950s, right? So we have actually come a long way, right? So eventually every new thing is sort of built on top of each other, right? So even Python is written in Python is a high level language. So what is a high level language? A language which does not directly communicate with the hardware, right? So a Python is in fact written in another language. So that is a low level language. So what is a low level language? So low level language is something like your C. C is a low level language which communicates directly with your hardware, right? Because you need to understand this concept that whatever we are doing here, it is being sent to a particular machine, and everything is happening on a piece of a hardware component, right? So this is a very important thing, and those hardwares are nothing but they have memory, right? So even when you're using phone, right? So you're saving any photo, so it's getting saved in a particular memory in your chip, right? So everything is getting stored there. Okay. So here, similarly, when we are writing any statement, right? So Python is interpreting this, right? So by interpretation, what do I mean? I mean that, let's say, if I talk about this statement x is equal to 1, 1 is being assigned to this variable x, and this x now resides somewhere in a particular memory address. And if I, what I do, so if I just write x here, so what it does, it goes to this location and sees that, yeah, x points to this location and has the value 1. So it will just print that value which is contained in this particular memory address. So this is what we refer to as a statement. I'll just, yeah, clean this up. All right. So let's move forward. So now what is an expression? So expression is a combination of values, variables, operators, and calls to functions. So expressions need to be evaluated, right? So if you ask Python to print an expression, the interpreter evaluates the expression and displays the result. So in this case, okay. So in this case, when I write x, so it prints and displays, so it evaluates the expression, right? So it is just a single, just the name of the variable, but it's getting interpreted, right? So let's say if I use the print statement, so print 1 plus 1, right? So what's happening? This is being evaluated, okay? And then it, yeah, it performs this particular operation that it needs to print these values, right? So whatever 1 plus 1 will be, so it will just print that particular thing. Now, expressions can be really complex, right? So for example, this is a particular expression in which I have a string, I am writing a function len, and I'm just printing this, okay? So this is in a way an expression which is a combination of values, variables, operators, and calls to functions, right? So what is the call to function here? Len, and of course the print, okay? So just keep this in mind that in Python we have statements and expressions, and so there would be very minute differences, but very critical. So you don't have to get worried about those. But when you actually become really familiar with the concepts of functions, methods, and other type of objects which are supported in Python, you'll be then able to come back to this basic difference between statement and expression. So for now, what I suggest you guys don't worry about what exactly a statement or expression is, but think like that. Yeah, so this is essentially a print statement. Okay, so eventually what I'll do, I'll be using these terms interchangeably, right? But they do not necessarily mean the same thing. But because we are at a very nascent stage in terms of our understanding of Python, so we'll try to not confuse ourselves with these intricate terminologies, but I'll try to use them interchangeably. Okay. So, but let's see some other examples, and some things might get clear to you. Okay. So in this example, len is a built-in Python function, which we already have encountered. Print is again a function, type is again a function, right? So the evaluation of an expression produces a value, right? It produces a value, which is why expressions can appear on the right-hand side of assignment statements, right? So maybe what I could have written here, so x is nothing but length of a particular string, which is, let's say, ABC, something like this, right? So this is an expression. So that's why they can appear on the right-hand side of assignment statement. A value all by itself is a simple expression, and so is a variable, right? So evaluating a variable gives the value that the variable refers to, right? So if I, yeah, execute this cell, okay, and I write y, okay, so this is again an expression, because an expression is essentially, when we evaluate this, essentially when I run this, so it evaluates that expression and produces a value, right? So here, what is the value? So value is 3.14, which is again stored in our variable y, okay? So this is, of course, an assignment statement, so in this statement, what is happening, right? So when I running y is equal to 3.14, it does not give me any output, right? So only the prompt is returned, right? So when I go to the, let's say, the end of the line, right? So if I write something like y is equal to 3.14, it runs this and adds this another cell, right? But it does not give me any output as such. Okay, so yeah, so where was I? Yeah, so statements such as the assignment statement, they do not return a value, they're simply executed. Okay, so I think, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. So Sanchita is asking, is every statement an expression? So that might not be the case. Okay, so we'll go through some examples today. And so expressions are essentially those which will give, yeah, when you evaluate them, they produce a particular value, right? So for example, there is an important library, let's say pandas, right? So I can write import pandas as PD, right? But this does not give me any output, right? So this is an import statement, but this is not an expression. Okay. So I hope you understand the difference, Sanchita. Can you please confirm? Yeah. So okay, great. So nice to know that you guys are asking really interesting questions, and this is what I expect from the class, right? So you guys should be, see, we are understanding such a subject which is studied by very few people, or even if it's studied by a lot of people, because of course data science has been a lot overhyped in the last few years. But even a lot of people are trying to read this particular subject, but not a lot of people ask questions, right? So when you ask questions, then only you will understand the entirety of things, right? Because everything which you are studying, this is not history, right? So you just have to cram stuff, remember about the events, but you need to be very logical in your approach. You need to think that yeah, what will happen if I do this, right? So because you have this Python playground with you, so you can ask yourself millions of questions, because I know you guys are really motivated people, right? So you can ask bunch of questions to yourself and try to see experiment. So experiment is the key. So when we talk about science, right? So we're learning data science, right? So when we talk about science, so in science, what we do, we try to conduct experiments, and then we try to come up with theories which will support our observations, right? Or our whatever we have observed, right? So we do experiments, we collect some data, and then we come up with theory that, yeah. So for example, let's say when Newton came up with the idea of gravity, right? So he went on and made some observations, and then he tried to fit his theory to that particular observed data, and then he was able to conclude that, yeah, it seems like my theory is correct, right? But that is not the case. So essentially science is progress. We are developing constantly. Everything is being uh, uh, yeah, everything is being developed. So because we are in such a time, right? So everything is now they're getting built on top of each other, right? So as they say that standing on the shoulder of giants, right? So Newton came up with the idea of gravity, and then Einstein came up with another interpretation of gravity, which was much more better, right? Which was better. In fact, when you use GPS, right? So you send signals from the satellites and here and there. And there we use this concept of time dilation, stuff like that. And so that was a really good advancement, right? So if you're sticking to only Newton's theory of gravity, we wouldn't have GPS at all, right? Or even if you had GPS, it will show you the location of your friend on live location, some 10 kilometers away or 100 kilometers away, right? So those things are really important, right? So when you talk about science as a whole, so we need to ask questions to ourselves, right? So the more questions you ask, the more better you will understand the reality around us, right? So here also we are trying to understand a lot of phenomena. So data science is being used across all the industries, right? So you have logistics. So there are some set of problems which we can, from where we can just explore the data and try to build a machine learning model, and that will help us explain why whatever which we have observed, why is that happening, right? So that's of course not the best model, that's not the perfect reason or explanation, but we can come up with a reasonable explanation up to some extent, right? And we always want to increase this degree of extent, right? So we want to be much better at explaining a particular observation or and whatever we have seen better than what we were given earlier, right? So these things are really important, and I would encourage you guys to ask as many questions as possible. There might be some intricate questions or nuances which I might not be familiar with. So in those cases, I can go back and look at those and try to come up with the explanation. Okay. So Of course, so but I encourage you guys to totally ask questions because these will really be important. Okay, so I digressed a bit. Sorry about that. Let's move forward. Okay, so now here, on the other hand, the result of executing the assignment statement is the creation of a reference from a variable y to a value 3.14, right? So what happened here when we wrote, I'll just add that cell here. So we wrote something like 3.14, right? Maybe, yeah, doesn't matter, right? So we wrote y is equal to 3.14. So what happens? That it assigns a value 3.14 to a variable y. Now this variable resides in some memory location or address, right? So, but when we just print this, so it is evaluated and whatever the value it contains, it is getting returned. Okay. So instructions that a Python interpreter can execute are called statements, right? So when I ran this, where went, okay. I think I deleted that. So for example, let's say this is a statement, which is what we call an import statement, right? So I can run this import pandas as PD, okay? And if you think, if I write PD dot or maybe so it gives me a bunch of things, right? So PD dot data frame, things like these, right? So whenever we are writing, let's say statements such as this one, okay, so what's happening? The Python is interpreting this and executing, right? So this is what we call as import statement, right? So a is equal to 1 is an assignment statement. We'll see it if statement today, and then in the next week on Monday we'll be talking about for statements, while statements, etc. Of course. Okay. So the idea is statements are essentially those instructions which a Python interpreter can execute, and expressions are essentially those which will produce a value. Okay. So I hope this makes sense. Can you guys please confirm, even if you're at least slightly know what's the difference between statement and expression? I'm not expecting you to understand the entirety of things, but I do hope that you understand what's the basic difference between statement and expression. Okay, so that's perfect. Yeah, most of you understand this. All right. So now talk about some new concepts. Okay, so here is the one which is multi-line statements. Okay, so in Python, the end of a statement is marked by a new line character, but we can make a statement extend over multiple lines with the line continuation character, this one. Okay, so let's try to do an experiment. Okay, so essentially every time we'll be just doing an experiment. Okay, so always try to stick to your basics. Okay, try to do as many experiments as you can do. Okay, so here let's say I try to execute such statement, right? So where what I'm doing, I'm trying to assign the sum of all the first 11 natural numbers to A. Okay, so let's try to run this, right? So it says it throws an error. Okay, so this is a syntax error, right? Can you, if you guys remember, I'll just clean this notebook. What I can also call as blackboard, right? So can you guys tell me what kind of errors you have seen before? So apart from syntax error, sorry, yeah, I'll just probably close this one. Okay. So apart from syntax error, what kind of errors have you seen earlier? So type error, key error, index error, and have you index out of range? What other errors you have encountered earlier? Any error specific to, let's say, strings or tuples? So this particular object does not support item assignment. Yeah, I think Priyanshi wrote that. Very good. Okay, so I think yeah, runtime error can also be there. Okay, so these are the bunch of errors which we have seen up till now. In future, we'll be interacting with, or we'll be seeing a bunch of more errors, right? So that's great. So you remember what you have been already taught. That's great. Okay, so this is an example of a syntax error. So here, why is this happening? So every single line is a particular statement. Okay, so if I do not specify here, so I'll not be able to handle this. And so Python, what Python understands that this is a particular statement when we write in this fashion, right? So it says that, yeah, after plus, we don't have anything. So what do I need to add? right? So better you remove plus, then I'll be able to make sense of this. Okay, so what do you think this will give us, right? So this gives us some output, right? So what is the output which we are getting? Which we are getting this particular output, right? But here, as soon as I have plus, right, so Python does not know what is here, right? So it's unable to interpret this particular thing, and that's why it will throw you an error, right? So this is a syntax error, and Python is actually really smart and will tell you that, yeah, you are making a mistake. Yeah, just fix this error as soon as possible. All right. So now what we can do. So this is okay. So all right. Maybe can we do something else? So maybe if we can have, let's say, plus here, and what about this? Will this run? Right. So this again gives us an in. Right. What about this? So these things will also, what do you think? Will this work? Right. So this works, right? So if you provide not forward slash, but backward slash, right? So Python says that, yeah, these things are in continuation. Okay. So these things are in continuation. They are part of the same thing. Okay. So that's why it's able to execute this without any error. And if you see what does A contain? So A contains 66. Okay. Which is nothing but the sum of all these numbers, right? So without this backward slash, right? So we couldn't have executed this statement, right? So now, so this is what we call as, this is an explicit line continuation, right? So in Python, line continuation is implied inside parentheses, brackets, or braces. Okay. So instead of doing this, what we can do, right? So we can provide parentheses, right? So we can provide parentheses. So this will then be a single statement, which is nothing. So if I just write it above here, okay, it is essentially the same thing. Okay. So we can have something like this, and this is now, so this will work. Okay. So this is what we'll call as, okay. So this works, right? So we need to provide the parenthesis if you want to handle multi-line statements. Okay. So just keep this in mind. This is not that big of a concept that you should bother about much. Okay. So let's look at another example. So so let's say if I want to have square brackets, do you think it will work? What do you think? And what is A? Right. So A is 45. So when I write this, so can you tell me what is the type of A? Let me just clear this, and then you can write it before you leak your answers to everyone else. Can you tell me what is the type of this particular variable, which is A? Okay, that's great. So it's a list. Someone is saying int. I lost. Yeah. So sheets. I think this should be a list. What do you think? I lost sheets there. Maybe, yeah. So yeah. So it should be a list, right? Because this is a list object. So if I write type, so this is a list, right? Because everything in Python, it has been defined, because of course we are adding all the numbers, but eventually the sum of all these numbers is just a single number, and that is enclosed within a square bracket. So it will be a list. So you agree with me, Streets, on this case? Okay. And I request especially students of cohort Nilgiri, so create a Padlet account and then open this, right? So that I can know. So because there's someone anonymous, I don't know who this guy is, right? So I won't be able to keep track whether you're participating in the discussion. Okay, so you might lose some credits in that regard. So please, create a Padlet account and then answer. So I'll be able to figure out so which are the people who are actively interacting during the live class. Okay. So yeah, Seeds has given me the green signal. That's great. Okay, so I'll just clear this board, and maybe I'll come back to this board in a while when I have a new question. Okay, great. So moving ahead. Okay, so you can use the curly braces too, but again that will give you. What about curly braces? Let's do it here. Okay, and then so A is this, right? And what will be the type of A? Needless to say, it will be a set, right? Because essentially this is a number, and then it's enclosed in a curly braces, right? Okay, perfect. So now I have a string here. The variable is colors, and I have a bunch of information here. Okay. So here also I can provide this backward slash and write my something else to maybe here, right? So I can write bunch of things here, and this will be a valid string, and I can, yeah, just print this colors. Okay, and as you can see, it gets printed, right? So if I don't use this, right, so what it will give me, it will give me an error, right? So end of line while scanning string literal, right? So it's trying to find the end of this particular code, right, but it's not able to find it, right? So that's why it's throwing an error. So in this way you can handle multi-line statements. Okay, so using implicit or explicit uh, continuation. All right. Okay, there is one more thing which you should not know. Okay, but I'll just tell you because this is coming from a previous version of Python. So, so in Python, okay, so I'll just first try to give you an idea. So these are three statements in Python. These are three assignment statements to be precise. So in the first statement, I'm assigning the value of 1 to this variable A, 2 to this variable B, 3 to this variable C. Okay, so there are three statements, but we can also write colon here. Okay, and these will be interpreted as different statements. Okay, so so this colon thing was prevalent in the previous versions. This is also supported in the current version because this will not throw me any error, and I can see what C contains. So C contains a value 3, right? And also if okay, so I hope, yeah, so you don't need to, in fact you should not follow this practice, right? So don't so write everything, whatever statement you want to write, so write everything in a new line, right? Okay, so this is a really good practice. Okay, all right, now let's talk about one more important aspect. Okay, so I don't know if you have studied this or not. So what we can do, so instead of assigning three variables these values, we can also write this in this particular fashion. So A comma B comma C, and then I write one. So this list. So this is my, what I'm storing in A. Then I have this tuple 5 comma 7. This is I am storing in B, and then uh, this is a, this is what, a set or a dictionary. So this is a set which I am storing in C. Okay. Okay, so I want you guys to tell me. So if I store this in a particular single variable, okay, okay, I'll just first tell you what A, B, C's are, okay, and then I'll ask you a question. So let's see what A is. So A is this list, B is this list, okay, and C is this particular. A, B is tuple, and then C is your set. Okay, so now very interesting questions arise from this particular example. Let's say if I don't write A, B, C, if just I write A and execute this, what do you think? Can you tell me the type of this variable A? Can you tell me the type of variable A here? Okay, so maybe I can, yeah, I don't know. Guys, those who have other answers, can you please delete the previous answers, in fact? So people are saying it will be a list. Some are saying it will be a tuple. The tuple guys seem to be smart, I'm assuming. Okay. Sanchita is saying tuple. Then Smoothie is saying tuple. Rajat is saying list. Rajat, can you please think on this particular aspect? So I want to, yeah. So Rajat changed his answer to set. Uh, okay, no, list only, right? So Rajat, do you want to switch your answer? So let's say I give you three options: list, set, and tuple. So what do you think you'll go with? Okay, so maybe sorry, I lost Rajat. Yeah, Rajat is here. Okay, so can you tell me, will it be tuple or a list? So you can add a point in your answer to only, right? So you can add another line. Okay, so where is he? Okay, so okay, let's see what it is. Okay, and then okay, so let's see what A is. So so A is a tuple. Okay, so A is a tuple. So when I assign this to a single variable, so the entire thing, because I have separated them by comma, I didn't even need to specify the parenthesis here, right? I didn't even have to specify the parenthesis, right? So without even that, I just wrote all, so these elements just by separating them by comma. So A is still a tuple. Okay, so we can type and get the type of A. So A is a tuple. So this is a really useful statement. So for example, let's say if you want to store 5 values together, okay. So you can write something like 1, comma 2, comma 3, comma 5. Okay. So A will take the value 1, B will take the value 2, C will take the value 3, D will take the value 4, and E will take the value 5. But what if you just keep one variable here? Okay, so it will now just create a tuple of all these elements. Okay, so can you guys tell me if these type of statements are clear to you? So Priyanshi is saying, can list be an element in a tuple? Okay, that's a great thing. So let's say 2 comma 3, right? So right, so it can be, no, it's really easy. Yeah. Okay. That's great. So I hope you guys are able to follow me till this point. Uh, okay. So that's great. So let's now move on to some other important concepts. So I think I've already told you this particular concept, which is Python comments. But anyway, I'll just recapitulate what I have taught you previously. So comments are very important while writing a program. Okay. So this is a very generic question. It does not need much intelligence. But anyway, I want you to guys to tell me. So in which cases do you think a comment will be helpful? Right. So can you tell me 1, 2, 3 scenarios where a comment, having a comment is helpful, right? Okay, so Chitranjan is saying when someone else is still writing, okay. Debugging, Smoothly is writing debugging, so that could be, right? So because let's say if you wrote a piece of code and it's not just 1 line or 2 line, but let's say it's 100 lines piece of code, right? And you have added a comment, so you, and even within that 100 lines of code, so for each specific sub blocks, you'll need if you have comments, so it's very easy to read the code, right? So code readability increases a lot, right? So Shubham Gugari is also saying to understand code. In a way, yeah. So code readability gets, yeah, it increases in a way that you know what this particular piece of code is doing because you've already written that in the comment. Okay. So code readability, understandability. Bhanu is saying, okay. Shweta is saying code readable. All right. For better understanding, Vineet is saying explanation. Help you remember what you did. So Prashant is, yeah, you're really correct. Right. So it helps you remember what you did. Okay. So let's say you were doing a 1 month project and there you only had to write Python codes, right? So you wrote around 10,000 lines of Python code, but you just forgot to add comments to your code, right? And now if you try to run that code and some bizarre error is happening, right? So you won't be able to debug the code in a quick way, right? So, but if you had the comments, so that the comments essentially tell you that, yeah, this particular piece of code is being used for this purpose. So it's a really handy thing to have. Okay. And yeah, that's great. So yeah, I'll just clear this slate. All right. So very good, guys. So I think, yeah, you're understanding things and I'm really happy. Okay. So comments are very important while writing a program. They describe what is going on inside a program so that a person looking at the source code does not have a hard time figuring it out, right? So continuing with the previous example, suppose you wrote 10,000 lines of code and you didn't write any comments and you gave it to your friend to verify whether your code is correct, right? So that guy is going to have a very hard time figuring out what's the problem, right? Because comment is supposed to be the most, yeah, basic structure of your code, right? So if you have the comments, so codes are very easy to read, right? So any other person, any external person can verify what's happening, right? And right? So it's code shareability also increases. Okay, so you might forget the key details of the program you just wrote in a month's time, right? So even if you read any particular thing, so let's say you studied a particular concept, so if you don't revise that, so you will only be able to retain almost 40% of that after 24 hours, right? So it's a human nature, right? We tend to forget stuff very easily. So it's very useful practice to include comments in your code, right? And I request you all guys, whenever from now onwards, so you have your assignments, you have your projects, and then you will be doing capstone projects too, right? So whenever you're writing a piece of code, always make sure that you're writing proper comments, right? Do not do not get any slack on that front, right? Because this will be useful for you only, because when you revisit your codes which you have written in past, right, so it will be very easy for you to go through that and brush up your concepts, right? Okay, you already know this thing. In Python, we use the hash symbol to start writing a comment. Okay, so this is a pretty common thing which I've already discussed with you earlier. It extends up to the new line character. Comments are for programmers to better understand the program, right? Python interpreter ignores comments, right? So as I've told you previously, so Python does not, it does not care much for the comments, right? So it does not interpret them. Okay, so so you can write a comment in this way. So you write hash. Okay, so one important thing is, let's say if you go to new line, you write something. So this is not in green. So everything in green will be a comment. Okay, not everything, but of course we have some specific keywords like def. Okay, this is blue. Maybe what list. So list is a reserved keyword. So this is a green, right? But of course, everything which you have after hash, that will be in green. But here, if you want to add this to your comment, so you need to add another hash here. Okay. Okay. Maybe can we do something else? What about this? No, it won't work. So you need to provide hash here. Okay. So this is commenting is a very standard practice in coding or any programming you are doing, right? So always make sure that you are writing comments, right? So in your assignments, as of now, I've been putting comments over there, right? So you need to do this, right? So you have been getting a bit of hand holding, but when you move to, let's say, complex topics, so there you'll not everything will not be just served to you. So you need to come up with original ways to do stuff, and there you need to definitely write the comments what your piece of code is doing, right? Also, this helps from our perspective. So we have an evaluator who's evaluating your assignments. So if you write a comment, so it becomes easy to understand what's going on. Okay, so right, so this is a particular, right? So if you want to extend this to a multiple line, so you need to add hash to each and every line here. Okay, another way of doing this is to use triple quotes, either this one, right? So three single quotes or three double quotes. Okay, so these triple quotes are generally used for multi-line strings, but they can be used as a multi-line comment too. Unless they are not doc strings, they do not generate any extra code, right? So you learn about doc strings when we talk about functions. Okay, so but I'll just give you an example here how you can use triple quotes. So you have something like this, right? So now I'm writing everything which I want to include in my comment as this, and then I write enclose them within three single quotes. Okay, and let's try to run this particular piece of line, right? So this does not get interpreted, right? So and yeah, so we get the output of A here. Okay, so I hope this is easy for you to understand. Okay, now moving ahead, indentation in Python. So this is also really important. So it is important to keep a good understanding of how indentation works in Python, right? So Python also supports automated indentation, right? So if you write some keywords and you complete that line and press enter, it will direct you to a proper indentation, right? So if you guys are not aware about this particular term, so for example, if you see in Google Doc, right? So let's say you're writing bunch of points, right? So let's say world is, let's say this is a line, right? So world is chaotic. Okay, so now you can have a bunch of bullets within this major point, right? So this is what we call as indentation, right? So it's indented in a particular fashion, right? So this is really important from Python perspective. Okay, so this is what indentation is, and we'll see how this indentation is manifested in Python. So uh, I'll just give an example. So we have not even yet discussed if statement, but I'll just try to give you an example here. Okay, so let's say if I have written two statements here, which is A is equal to 2, B is equal to 1, right? So these are two assignment statements in which I'm assigning a value 2 to this variable A and then 1 to this variable B. Okay, now this thing that, yeah, there is a keyword which is if, right? So what I'm trying to do, so I'm writing if B is greater than A, and then there is some colon. Okay, so the most important thing you need to notice here, if I just press enter, it will, yeah, send me to a different indentation. If I write press enter, okay, I pressed too many enters here. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so if I press a single enter, see, there is some indentation here, right? As you can see, there's some space, right? So whatever now you want to execute within the if statement, you need to start writing from here. So maybe I can write print B. Okay, so it will execute this, right? So it won't execute this. Why? Because B is not greater than 1, right? So let's say if I write less, so it will execute it. Okay, sorry. So you don't need to currently understand what this particular statement is. The only important thing which you need to take away from this particular example is that there is a concept of indentation. Okay, and you'll be, yeah, thrown with this concept at your face a lot many times, right? So you don't have to, yeah, just worry about this, what if statement is doing, right? So in this way, so if I yeah, point my cursor here and I just press enter, it takes me automatically to here, right? So but if I'm here, A is equal to 1, right? So if I press enter now this takes me to this particular indentation, right? So I hope you understand the concept of indentation, and we'll be covering this when we use if statement, while statement, for statement, and then when we create functions using the def keyword, right? So all those things will be covered. Okay. So you'll notice that Python is less cluttered, of course, and it is much more readable than other languages like C or Java. Okay. So the statement is ended with a colon in our case, this particular case. So a statement is ended with a colon, and a white space is used to describe what takes place in case of the statement, right? So, and another major difference is the lack of semicolons. So we don't even need to specify semicolons to identify, right? Okay. So I'll come back to these points when we have covered all those conditional statements. So you'll be learning about if, elif, and else statements now. So I'll come back to this particular indentation aspect in just a while. Okay. So yeah, let me progress. So conditional statements. So if statements in Python allows us to tell the computer to perform alternative actions based on a certain set of results. Okay. So in the if statement, so after the keyword if, we write some action, or we do some comparison, and based on that comparison, we ask the computer to perform some set of actions. Okay. So verbally, how can we translate this? So I'll ask computer, hey, if this case happens, perform this action, else you do something else. Okay. So we can expand this idea with elif and else statements, right? So how can I translate this in normal English? So hey, if this case happens, perform some action. Okay. Else, if this case happens, perform this action. Else, if this case happens, perform this action. And once we have exhausted all the sort of possible conditions, then we can write else do this action, right? So in the else part, you do not even need any condition because that's part of the else, right? So what is the English translation for this particular piece of if else statements I told you? So the first thing which I'll ask Python to do, if this case happens, perform this action. Else, if this case happens, perform this action. Else, if this case happens, perform this action. Else, when you have run out of all those cases which you want to do, else perform this action. Okay, so you'll have a condition in the if part, you'll have a condition in the elif part, which is short for else if, and then in the else part you don't have any condition. Okay, so something like this. So if case one, so this is what you are, so if this case happens, so this is essentially a comparison operation which we'll be doing. Okay, so if this case happens, if this is true, okay, if this is true, perform this particular action. So what could be the actions you can perform? You can print a variable, you can store anything in another variable. So all sort of actions you can imagine, you can do that within that if block. Okay, next is, let's say elif, as in else if this case happened, which is in this case case 2, perform this particular action. Okay, now if you have run out of all such cases, so you can write your else part. So here you can simply write else, and now here we don't have anything as such case 3, right? Because everything which is outside of these two cases will automatically be absorbed in else. Okay, so it is sort of let's say you have a big box, right? So this comes in your first if, right? This second comes in your elif, right? And so once you have exhausted this, right, so automatically what's remaining, what are the cases which are remaining? So they are remaining here, and this will be included in else, right? So in else we don't need to specify any condition. Okay, so do you guys get the idea between if, elif and else? Yeah, can you please post in the chat if you just get the basic difference between if, elif and else, right? So this is not something new, or this is not something very esoteric to Python, right? It is essentially a bunch of ways in which we can portray a particular scenario, right? So essentially a flow chart sort of thing. Okay, so great guys. Okay, so let's now just run some piece of code, and yeah, these things will become clear. So here I am assigning a value 20 to a variable called x. Okay, now I'm doing a if, I'm writing an if statement. So if x equals to 20. Okay, so can you guys tell me what will be the output of this if I run it here? Can you guys tell me? Maybe, yeah. What will be the output of x is equal to 20 in this case? Yeah, I'm not asking about what this will print. I'm just talking about this particular highlighted cell, which is x is equal to 20. Okay, so true, right? So more generally, we can say that whatever we have here after if, this is essentially a comparison operation. So any comparison operation will yield a Boolean value, right? Because when you are comparing two things, so here we are comparing x with 20, right? So whenever we are comparing two things, right? So either both will be equal, right? So either that comparison will be true or it will be false. Okay. So here we'll always have a comparison operation, and then in the if statement, after once we have written this comparison, okay. So if this condition gets valid, okay. So now you can write this particular colon, okay, and then you can write whatever action you want to do. So in this case, what are the actions which I'm trying to do? So I'm printing x is greater than 10. This is not 10 factorial. This is the way of expressing my happiness. Okay, and then here I'm performing another action, which is print. So here I'm using the f string. I hope you guys are familiar with the f string, right? If not familiar, I'll just repeat it for you now, right? So what you need to do, so you need to write f, and then you write everything within quotes, and then you write whatever you want to print. So x is, and here we can pass the variable, right? So x is, so this will take a value, whatever is contained in x. Okay, so let's go ahead and print this. Okay, so how this is being evaluated? So let's go through this. So if x is equal to 20, right? That means if this is true, then only perform these actions. So let's say if I write this, what will happen? Can you guys tell me if I write 10? Let me just clean this slate, and then you can post your answers. Okay, so now you can tell me, right? So if I write here, so what will happen? What will I get? So output, I'm talking about what will be the output here. So what will be the output I'll get here, right? So let's say if I delete the output. So if I execute this, what will I get? Will there be any output? Okay, so this Santa is saying nothing. Kumar Shubham is also saying nothing. Rohan Roni is also saying nothing. Rishabh is saying nothing. I think, yeah, yeah, this will give me nothing, right? Because this part will, these two actions will never be performed unless and until this is true, right? So this is not true because we know here, right? So x is 20 and 20 equals to 10. So if I, yeah, try to run this, so this is false. So if false, so yeah, it will not execute this particular statement within the if block, right? So every statement, especially these are indented, right? So these are not the outside the if block. Okay, now tell me what will I get. Okay, so before I ask you this, just keep in mind that this print statement will only be executed when this if condition is valid. Okay, so this is, in a way, this is within the scope of this if statement. Okay, but if I write print here, okay, so what will I get in output? Let me just clear this again, and then you guys can answer. Sorry about the delay. Okay, so now you can start answering. So what will this print? Okay, so a lot of people are saying x is 20. Someone is saying, I think x is 20, Rohan. Okay, all right, so let's print this. So x is 20. So here is the basic difference between the previous case in which we had this particular thing, right? So whenever we are writing this with an indentation, whenever we are writing this with an indentation, so that means these two actions will only be performed when the if condition is valid. But if I write this with the same indentation as if, so that this means that this statement is not within the scope of the if block. Okay, so it does not matter to this particular statement, right? Whether the condition in the if statement is getting, yeah, is valid or not. Okay, so it does not even care about the if block. Once this has been executed, this will also get printed. Okay, so this will also get executed, right? So this is essentially unrelated to whatever there is in the if block. Okay, so the indentation is really important in this case. Okay, so here we get nothing, but if I, yeah, change the indentation, I align this with our original, right? So this will print x is 20, it despite, yeah, this condition not getting fulfilled. Okay, so can you guys please tell me if you understand this particular bit? Okay, yeah, so Priyanshi understand, Vineet, Sheets, Rishabh. So all of you guys, yeah, you're doing great. If you're able to understand this, that's perfect. Okay, so let's move ahead. Okay, so up till now, we have just talked about if statement. Okay, just give me a moment. All right, so moving ahead. So essentially, whatever we are writing after the if block, and of course you need to keep in mind the colon. Colon is really important, right? So if I don't write colon, it will send me to this indentation not within the if block, right? But if I have colon, that means it will send me within that, right? So because, see why this happens, because Python knows that if you're writing any if statement, so you try finding a case, and if that case is true, you want to do some action, right? You'll only use if statement where you want to do some comparison, or if there is a right, you want to do some comparison and you want to perform some action, right? So that's why you automatically gives you that proper indentation. Else, because logically thinking, right, it doesn't make sense that if I write a if statement and it sends me outside this, right? So there's no point of writing the if statement, right? So I hope you understand that point. So as I was saying, this is nothing but a Boolean variable, right? So you learned in the first class itself that the double equal to is essentially a comparison operator, and it will return a Boolean value either true or false. Okay. So if, so let's consider this particular set of statement. Okay. So I am writing if true and then colon. Okay. So in fact, I'll just write this so that you understand what's happening. So if true, I write colon, then I press enter. It automatically sends me to the proper indentation because Python is really smart. And yeah, so yeah, this is true. Okay, so let's try to print this. So it prints, yeah, this is true. Okay, because the only thing matters to the if statement is that whether whatever that is after the if part, right, if keyword in fact, whether that's true or not. If that is true, only then this will get executed. Okay, let's talk about this particular statement, right? So if this is false, always make sure that you are providing space over here. Okay, and the colon is of course very important. I just demonstrated the importance of this. So if, so it will execute this particular thing, right? So I think this is okay. So if I just press enter, it will take me to the proper indentation and I can execute this, and it does not print anything, but I can go outside the indentation. I can print, oh no, this is false, not iOS. Yeah. So it will print, oh no, this is false. Even if this were true, right, it will print both of them, right? It will print both of them, right? Because why? Because this is true, right? So it will execute this particular action, which I'm asking the computer to do. In this case, this action is just printing a bunch of stuff. But also outside this if block, right? I'm asking the computer to print this is, right? So this is regardless of whether there was any if statement or not, right? So this is essentially a standalone statement such as, let's say, x is equal to 4. Okay. So yeah, so x, if I try to print what is x, so it will be 4, right? So everything gets executed, right? Whichever is outside the if block, and within the if block, those actions will only be performed if the condition is true. Okay, so I hope, yeah, you get this idea. Okay, so okay, so x is equal to false, so I can of course assign a boolean value to a variable. I can also assign true to another variable, which is y. So if y, print y was true, else print I will be printed in any case where x is not true. Okay, so x is false, okay, but y is true. So if true, that means of course this part of code will get executed. So y was true, it will get printed. Okay, now you can flip both of them. So I can write this as true and now false, and this is as true. So now if y, so y is false, so if false, so if this particular thing is false, right, so it will not execute this particular statement, rather it will go to the else part. Okay, so this is the first instance where we are adding the else keyword, right? So what I said, if this happens, execute this or perform this action, else you do this. Okay, we don't have any elif part here, but I hope this makes sense to you, right? So if this condition does not hold, you execute whatever there is in the else block, right? And also notice that in the else part, you don't have anything, right? So you don't have to specify anything, because the conditions for which this statement will execute, wherever this particular thing is false. Okay, so here we have y is equal to false. Let's try to run this, right? So it is of course printing whatever there is in the else part. Okay, so all right. So so I'm not seeing a lot of questions today. So that means you guys are able to understand. That's really encouraging. And in fact, yeah. So this is how you write the if else statements, right? So I'll take another example. So I have a variable city in which I've stored the value Pune, which is nothing but a string. So now I have a bunch of if, elif, and else statements. So how these works? So you know that we'll need to provide the condition or comparison for if and elif part, right? So whatever, okay. So here I write if, and then I write city is equal to New Delhi, right? So this will either be true or false. So if this is true, it will execute this print statement. Okay. Now else if city is equal to Mumbai. So in this case, if this is correct, so it will print this, or else it will print where are you. Okay, so I'll just try to execute this. Okay, so where are you, right? So because city is Pune, now let's replace city New Delhi. Okay, so I hope this will print this particular string. So let's see. So welcome to the Indian capital. Now let's say if I replace this with Mumbai. So this will print welcome to the financial capital of India. Okay. So few important things to keep in mind because we have all the three keywords here. Always after if you'll have a condition, and similar is the case with elif, right? So both will have the condition, and of course you need to specify the space here. And for all the three of them, you need to provide the colon. And once you do that, it will take you to the proper indentation, and then you can do whatever you want to do here. Okay, that's the thing. And then in else we don't have any condition because everything which is not included in the if and elif part. Okay, so let's say I have something like let's say Bangalore. Okay, so it will print where are you. Okay, because in everything outside of these comparisons, right? So here we are only doing two comparisons. So if city is equal to New Delhi or city is equal to Mumbai, right? So these two conditions are not even getting satisfied. So it will of course skip to the else part. Okay, but and if you write Mumbai, so it will only execute the elif part. Okay, so what will happen in this case? So I'll tell you. So the code comes here, right? So now city is equal to Mumbai in this case. So when it executes this particular thing, right? So this yields false. So it directly jumps over to this particular line. Okay, it does not perform any action, which was there in the if statement. It jumps to this particular part. Now it compares city is equal to Mumbai. It says, Mumbai is there and this is also Mumbai. So these two strings are equal. So this returns true. Then it executes this particular piece of code, which is welcome to the financial capital of India. Okay, and yeah, it does this, and it never goes to the else part, right? Because the condition has already been satisfied here. But if the condition is not satisfied, so these two things will not get executed, but it will skip to the else block and print whatever it is asked to do here. Okay, so these are very useful keywords and statements. So these will be used a lot throughout your programming, right? So if, elif, and else part, right? So these are really important. Okay. Do I have questions from people? No. All right. So sorry about this. Okay. So now, yeah, so I can do a bunch of similar operations. So nothing new about this with respect to the above example which we have done, right? So essentially you need to understand the if, elif, and else part. You need to understand that in the condition we have a comparison which is essentially a Boolean. So if that is true, then only that particular statement within that block will get executed, else it will not. Okay, so you need to understand these things. Okay, so now the final topic is I guess, yeah, truthy and falsy. So this is really important. Not that important, but it's quite useful. At least I have found this to be useful in my whenever I have done coding. So a truthy value will satisfy the check performed by if or while statements. We use truthy and falsy to differentiate from the Boolean values true and false. Why is so? So okay, so all these values are considered truthy except for the following, which are falsy. Okay, so if you have none after if, so if none or this keyword false, or if 0 or if 0.0 or if an empty list, right? So all these things are considered falsy. Okay, so I'll try to just give you an example. Okay, so here we have so as of now what I have been telling you, that in the if, after if, we should have a Boolean value. Okay, a Boolean value that is either true or false, right? Okay, so let's execute this statement. Okay, so see, if I write false, okay, so false is again a falsy value, right? So if this is falsy, so if it will not execute, it will execute whatever there is in the else part. Okay, now let's consider other example, right? So if I write if 0, can you tell me what is the output will I get? I'll just, yeah, clean this slate and then you can answer. Yeah, so 178. Okay, so if I write if 0, and one hint I'm giving you that 0 is falsy. Okay, so 0 is falsy. So if I write if 0, so what do you think will get printed? else part will get printed, right? Because this is interpreted as false in Python. Okay, so if zero, so there's some set of common things. So if none, false, zero. So let's execute this and then yeah, you'll get convinced. So yeah, so come on, you ace your test. Okay, if I write if one, okay, if I write if one, what will this print? Can you tell me? If one, so you can yeah update your answer. So if I write if one, what this will print? Come on, you ace your test, or well, I had a really bad day. What this will print? So a lot of people are saying, yeah, where is yeah? So if part will be executed. Great. So because one is not in these list, and this is in a way similar to the true statement or true value, right? So it prints, well, I had a really bad day. Okay. What about this empty string? Okay, so as you can see, empty string is a falsy. So again, you can expect that this will print, this is false. Okay, so everything here, if you write that against if, right? So if I write if none, okay, so this will print the else part because this is considered as falsy. This is not exactly false, but it's a Python way of dealing with these things. Okay, so there are some predefined falsy values, and apart from that, everything is truthy. Okay, what about if, let's say, if I write empty list, what do you think this will print? Right, so I'll just print this. So this is false. What about 1, 2? So if, right, so this is true, right? So of course, this does not, the usability might depend upon situation to situation, but of course, we're not doing any comparison here, right? So if this list, okay, so if this list exists, or if, let's say, if this is an empty list, then you can perform action based on that, right? So this is what we call as truthy and falsy, which is to differentiate from your traditional true and false, right? So this is an empty list is, you cannot say that an empty list is false, but we have another terminology for that, that is falsy. And if there is any empty list after the if keyword, so it will be considered as false, and that statement within the if block will not be executed. Okay, so you guys understand up till this point, right? So then we can yeah, thanks a lot for joining in today's session. I think we crossed some time. This might happen in some lecture, but anyway. Okay, so bye, have a good night.